Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of ValueCast. Today, we're going to be covering the wonderful topic of artificial intelligence, or AI, as everyone seems to know it nowadays. And the reason I wanted to discuss this today, and I'll introduce you to the guest in a second, um, is I see a high volume of content about AI. To be honest with you, a lot of it can be quite confusing, and I struggle sometimes to understand what actually is going to bring value. What's the best approach? And nothing really goes into enough detail sometimes to help me understand it. And I think when I started speaking to Troy, we flipped on a topic which we thought would be very useful for people that listen to the podcast, which is really around automation or augmentation. What brings greater value? So before we get into the topic, I wanted to introduce you to Troy Norcross. Troy's been in the technology industry for, my goodness, when you look at your profile, over 30 years. You've gone from basically virtual cockpits, which I know nothing about, right through to blockchain and AI executive strategy work. So Troy, welcome to ValueCast.
Hey, great to be on the show. Thanks so much.
No problem. It's a pleasure to have you. So yeah, maybe give the people who are listening a quick run through of how you've got to where you are now.
Sure thing. I think one of the things that a lot of people find very curious about me is that I started off in 4,000 acres of farmland and a
Wow.
thousand head of beef cattle in the middle of Missouri. You know,
Really?
and
Tell me that one.
yeah, that's actually the beginning of the story because I was allergic to every major crop there was. And
Wow.
at 12 years old, I went to a big university and walked into a computer room and it was clean air. And I said, "That's it. That's my ticket. I'm off the farm. I'm going to be in computers." So that was the beginning of my life in IT.
Great.
As you said, I worked for McDonnell Douglas. I used to write flight simulators for military aircraft. Had a
Wow.
number of years in the telecoms space, both in infrastructure and worked for Nokia on the device side for a while. I worked with startups for a number of years. Lived for 20 odd years in London, doing strategy consulting for startups and mid-sized companies. And then most recently, I was in the blockchain space working for Volvo Group. I
Mhm.
was the enterprise architect for a transport and logistics solution for them. And
Okay.
now, continuing my epic journey on cutting edge, sometimes bleeding edge technology, now I find myself in AI.
Great. Yeah. And it's when we spoke before, even you look at blockchain and the time it's been around. I don't think everyone still fully understands blockchain, unless you really get into the weeds of it. So now AI provides another layer on that. So brilliant. Thanks. Well, maybe for another discussion around virtual cockpits, but don't know much about those. But it'll be interesting to see what's going on there. So yeah, so on to the topic today. So yeah, augmentation, automation, or augmentation. What brings the greatest value. I think what will be really helpful is just to understand why is defining automation, augmentation important for businesses, Troy.
I think a lot of businesses are really kind of getting caught up in the hype cycle associated with artificial intelligence. And they're all just reaching around somewhat in the dark, trying to say, where is the best way that I can create value for my business? What's the low hanging fruit? And what's the lowest risk thing that I can do to kind of start? In the early days, they were talking quite a lot about using AI for customer support and
Mhm.
chatbots,
Yep.
and that's kind of an automation of a service. And by doing that, they said, what we'll do is we'll cut out 10,000 people in the Philippines, and we'll just put in a giant AI bot that will answer all of our questions for all of our customers. Which some people tried that, and it turns out it was indeed a terrible idea. AI is not quite ready for prime time,
Hmm.
but value initially was in cost savings by reducing headcount. That was
Yep.
what everybody started off by saying. And we looked at that pretty quickly and said, wait a minute, slow down. AI is not quite ready for replacing humans just yet. We're not at the AGI. We're actually at just kind of the generative AI, which is
Yep.
a next best word guesser. We're not
Yep.
using true intelligence, which is what AGI is.
Hmm.
So, what do we really want to do? Where is there real value opportunity? And we say it's augmenting your existing teams and giving them the power of AI to run the business, to execute more efficiently, to do things more effectively is a better way to create value within the business. So
Hmm.
we say, don't necessarily just go straight to the automation because you think it's the easy thing to do.
Yep.
look at augmentation, and that's a more tricky thing to do to actually get it in the right space.
Yeah.
I'll kind of pause there for a second.
No, no, that makes perfect sense. And I've, when we spoke before, I do see a number of businesses sort of go down the line of trying to automate a process beyond really understanding whether that's going to add the true value versus taking a bit of a higher level look. And it'd be interesting to get your views on, how businesses determine that. So you've got a lot of experience in this space. So maybe there's an example of a client or business you've been working with lately about, they've got this picture in their mind saying we want to use AI. We think we know what the value is of AI, but how do we even approach it? How do we even understand which is the best approach?
Yeah, and this is the really interesting thing is it's not about AI. AI is actually the second question. The
Hmm.
first question is what is the overarching business problem, the business challenge, or the complex data question that you've not been able to answer? That if you could answer that question, you could move your business forward. You could indeed effectively reduce costs. You could indeed better apply your resources. And so it's first off, what's the question? And
Yep.
once you know the question, then you can figure out, can AI be used to help you get to the answer to that question? An
Hmm.
example was there was a bank in Canada. They had almost 3,000 individual IT people that were doing a whole bunch of different projects.
Hmm.
I think there were 23 different kind of sections. And the CIO went to them and said, okay, I need to know what are your top 5 projects that we are working on as a bank in the IT space. And he got 23 different reports. Everybody measured it slightly differently. Everybody was counting things
Wow.
slightly differently. And it was a big mess. And he said, okay, we're going to see if AI can help us. So he connected to SAP and Oracle Financials and
Hmm.
Jira, which is a project management, and pulled in a
Yep.
lot of raw, unstructured data. Took
Hmm.
him 4 days. Once it was all
Wow.
embedded into the system and what they call a vector index, he asked the question, what are the top 5 projects that we're spending time on based on man hours and based on actual expenses?
Yep.
And it thought for a while and it came back with an answer. And he said, here are your top 5. So, wow, okay, well, that was fast. It actually answered the question that I asked. He went back to the teams and he said, okay, here's the answer. Is this right? Because another thing you've got to always remember with generative AI is it's not going to be 100% accurate.
Of course not. No. No.
It's statistically accurate, but it's not 100% accurate. The teams were like, well, it isn't the way we were going to measure it, and it isn't the way we look at it. But if you kind of you squint at it, yeah, it's accurate. He says that's great and that's terrible. So why is it great? It's great because you got the same answer that we did. Well, why is it terrible? Because those are not the top 5 priorities for the bank. We're spending all of our time and all of our money in the wrong place. That's adding huge value that you can immediately apply into the business by repurposing or
Hmm.
reallocating resource onto the priorities that are important.
Yeah. No, that's really really interesting, and because you do see, and obviously this is every company, but you do come across companies that are so keen to look at products that utilize AI that have been developed to potentially solve a problem that might be there, but not fully understanding. And I love your point. It's not, forget about AI actually. It's more, let's just focus on what the business problem is. And in my world, I've sort of lived and breathed that for a good 20 years where, there's so many issues that are taken where people don't truly understand the need and the business problem before actually implementing something that's going to solve it. So it's interesting that regardless of whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's anything, any technology that you're bringing in to help you understand the data, you still need the human side of it, right? You still need that
Yes.
piece of someone to give you, to give you the right direction. I wonder what happened to the team. That's the interesting question that I've always had from that example that you explained is, so what happened to that team that brought those priorities? Are they still
Well,
there? Is the question.
well, if it was 23 teams, it was probably a mix of in-house and outsourced IT teams.
Yeah.
Outsourced IT teams were probably contracts terminated in-house were resources that were reallocated.
Hmm.
And so it's much more efficient use of capital resources that's going to happen. Does it result in force reduction? Does it result in cost savings? Yes. But this comes to the age-old question, age-old being 18 months. Is AI going to take my job? Well, I think AI is not going to take your job. I do think that someone who knows AI better than you do will take your
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
A fundamental understanding of what AI is, how to speak to AI is going to be critical as far as a business skill going forward.
I completely agree. That there's definitely a lot of content and things I've listened to and spoke to is about people becoming far too generalist in today's world and relying on artificial intelligence too much to drive that knowledge base. So it's finding that right balance of training your highly skilled, knowledgeable people within whatever sector, whatever industry, but to integrate how AI can be used to enhance their role versus let's look at the fact that you're spending 50% of your time dealing with this administrative process. Let's find a tool you know, to automate that process, and then we'll work out what you can do, right? Because the message that I'm hearing is no, 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 no. Reverse that. Look at the knowledge base that you've got. Look at the skills you've got in your team, and understand them, and then help them ask the right questions from an AI perspective to then find out what the best solution is. Because yeah, okay, you might be spending 50% of your time on administrative things, but actually that might be good. We don't know. So I think that's some messages that I see that I find quite confusing at the moment, where I think people are going down the line of automating too quickly versus what you mentioned earlier.
Another aspect to that I call the unintended consequences of automation
Hmm.
is you take some of the juniors that are working in your organization or even some of your interns and you try to replace them with AI or AI enabled services.
Hmm.
That sounds really great because you've eliminated a lot of your low end cost. But if you have no juniors, how are you ever going to have seniors?
Yep.
If you don't have people who are working their way from the very basics all the way up to understand how the business works, how customers work, how the products work, you're never going to have your seniors. So again, take your juniors, augment your juniors, make them smarter, make them more capable, make them more efficient, but don't eliminate them.
No, agreed. It's really true because I did a podcast a while ago with a gentleman, Colin, who focuses a lot on specifically in the procurement industry, but around you know ensuring people are being trained correctly, going through the SIPS process, and all that wonderful work. And it's like, well, what's the whole point of doing that is to grow and expand and make sure that the people's knowledge continues to grow, but I'd be surprised at the moment if many businesses are incorporating, well, great, now you know what you know. What about if you incorporated AI into that process versus what you've just said, which is, what, let's cut out that junior level and let's just bring some basic thing in because I've never been a massive fan of it. I've experienced a lot of generative AI over my years, but I've yet seen someone within my industry come and say, you know what, we've just cut a huge headcount of roles in our business because we're using AI, and I think that fear factor is causing more of a challenge for those people than it is anyone else at the moment. Because technically, you're right, you've got to grasp it, you've got to take it within your role and show your business what you can do with AI to improve your job versus the other way around. It's an interesting.
And improve business outcomes. It's
Yes.
not just about my job. It's how do I
Of
deliver
course.
more value to the business through the
Yeah.
function that I'm doing more efficiently or more effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And you've worked, across yes, technology has been the focal point throughout your career, but at the same point you've worked in different industries, right? In different environments. Do you see artificial intelligence providing more value in specific industries, or do you think it doesn't really matter? It's about taking it and incorporating it into your business strategy.
I think the best analogy that I heard was from a guy called Michael Reed, and he was like, it's like databases.
Hmm.
It's a tool. You can use it anywhere. And so if you look at AI as a capability, you can apply it in a whole range of different industries.
Hmm.
It's not particularly better suited over one industry over another industry any more than a database is better suited for one industry over another industry. It's an underlying tool or a capability of which you build based on what your department or your business needs.
Mm, definitely. I would say I watched an interesting post on LinkedIn probably about a week and a half ago. Can't remember the guy's name. I'll have to give it to you at some point. But what was interesting was that he was talking through how developers are feeding in their knowledge into AI, and he feels that it's getting to a point within the next 12 months that developers will no longer be needed because the information that they're putting into the AI is going to supersede what they're doing, and it's going to start asking itself questions, and it's going to ask somehow start to know what questions to ask based on how the business will is evolving. Now, I found that quite confusing, and I don't know if what you feel about that, but to me, it's like, well, I get it, but you still need someone to input. However much AI evolves and how much it brings in, is it really going to completely remove a software developer who is out in the market, understanding the business needs, the business strategy, and then actually putting those in place? I can't see that AI is going to get to that position. Maybe you do. I'm not sure.
There are a couple of things I'll say on that. Number one, there have been a few articles floating around about how Amazon saved something like 4,000 man hours by
Right.
using AI in their development teams. Now, I'm going to say specifically coding,
Hmm.
the creation of code. AI, whether you're talking about Claude or we're talking about ChatGPT, both of them are getting very, very good at writing software.
Hmm.
And so the software developers are becoming less coders, but they're still software developers. And they're simply telling in a kind of a product owner perspective, this is the functionality that I need this software to do.
Hmm.
These are the inputs, these are the outputs. Go off and write Golang, go off and write PHP, you go off and write Python, whatever it is, and provide that back to me.
Hmm.
And so that's providing incremental efficiency gains. So you're not removing the software developer, you're actually changing how they think about things and the work that they're doing. They're not just doing coding, they're still doing software development. They're still looking at how does the business need get translated into a programmatic need.
Yeah.
Now, when you start moving beyond generative AI into AGI, then you start adding logic and you
Hmm.
start adding reason. And that will improve the capabilities of the code generation. So you'll say, actually, I need you to build me an e-commerce website. And that's all you have to say.
Yeah.
Then AGI will say, okay, in order for us to do that, I need this, 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 and this. These are the structures. And it will ask you 100 questions. And then once you tell it the answers to 100 questions, it will spit it back and say, here it is, ready for you to look at.
Yeah.
And I still think you must have a human in the middle. You don't say, here it is, publish. You
Hmm.
say, here it is. Okay, just give me a minute. I'm gonna poke around at this and I'm gonna send it to QA and I'm gonna do all the things that I would normally do, just like any other software product,
Yeah.
before I actually unleash it to the world.
Yeah.
So we're moving from generative AI to AGI, which is the actual logic and intelligence, but
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
No, it's a really interesting concept because yeah, everything. Well, again, I'm not into deep of it, but it's obviously yeah one way traffic. You ask a question, you get an answer. You don't ask a question, you ask 5 questions back. So when we start to see more of that, is then maybe people could start to maybe concern a little bit more, but it's still not removing people's jobs because I think the impact. And I suppose this is an important point, the impact on an organization sort of company culture and approach, in essence, I see it as almost giving more opportunity to people to expand their knowledge and expand their view of what's possible versus being beaten into the I've got to do these things, otherwise I'm not doing my job. It's like, no, let me ask the right questions. And if it does flip to that point where we're getting more questions back than we're asking, I can't see, I can't see it being a major impact bar just improving how opportunities are created for businesses.
But even today, when I'm using generative AI, I will give it a prompt. I want you to do X, Y, and Z for me. And then I will tell it, ask me 5 to 10 questions to ensure that you give me the best quality response. and I'll have it ask me questions that it needs to clarify in order to give me the best response. So I'm already telling it, ask me questions. Maybe I didn't tell you enough to do the best quality job.
Yeah, no, that's true. It'd be really interesting. Like and you may have seen this because you're speaking to companies every day around these topics. Um, to go back on that training impact, really. But if you started to see businesses, not specifically within development teams or technology focused teams, actually train their headcount, their resources to actually understand how to interrogate um, artificial intelligence and chat GPT correctly.
So I'm going to give you a long answer on that.
Okay.
The short answer is yes, they're teaching people how to use generative AI. Microsoft is spending millions trying to help people who have the Microsoft Office suite understand how to use Copilot
Hmm.
in simple things. How do you take meeting notes? How do you do basic spreadsheet analysis? How do you create a basic PowerPoint presentation? So they're training them on all of that kind of capability, which is built on their own enterprise data.
Okay.
So within the enterprise environment, they'll look at their OneDrive. They'll do those kinds of things.
Hmm.
The the biggest traction so far has been in the marketing content creation space,
Right.
which is both good and bad. That means the marketing department can indeed create more content more effectively and publish it, a lot faster and do a lot better,
Hmm.
and it loses its authenticity. There's something that the human mind can pick up and say, yeah, that's good, but you didn't write that. AI wrote that.
Hmm.
And we're still going to be valuing, and I think we'll value even more, true authenticity.
Yeah.
The third thing is shadow AI is becoming a problem in some enterprises.
Okay.
You might be familiar with shadow IT, which is when people started bringing their own computers or their own phones or whatever, and it
Hmm.
wasn't within the purview of the IT department. It was the shadow IT that was being run in the background because
Yeah.
people said, I need to get my work done and IT's not helping.
Hmm.
Well, now you've got shadow AI. So
Mm.
people have their own OpenAI or their ChatGPT account or their own Claude account. And they're like, oh, I could just do all of this so much faster if I just had AI, and IT won't let me. So I'm going to do it on my own. And
Right.
so you got these little pockets popping up. And sometimes not so smart pockets. Somebody
Mm.
uploaded 20,000 net promoter scores into ChatGPT for analysis. And ChatGPT trained on that data and started answering questions about that company because it suddenly had 20,000 net promoter scores.
Wow. Okay.
And that kind of corporate data leakage has terrified a lot of people.
Wow.
So there's all of this kind of happening. Even within some organizations where it's controlled, there's what I call AI sprawl.
Hmm.
Look at this little innovation thing going over here, and the marketing department's trying something over here. And every SaaS product in the world has suddenly got AI bolted on.
Yep.
Salesforce has AI, and SAP has AI, and Adobe has AI, and you're creating all these silos.
Yep.
And that's what I call AI sprawl.
Hmm.
And now, okay, I need to connect all of these things. I've got data governance, I've got privacy, I've got security. And suddenly your CIO is losing sleep in the middle of the night because they can't control all of this. And
Yeah.
they don't want to become Dr. No. They don't want to say, okay, no AI, because
Hmm.
I got to get my head around this. So they got to create an environment where they can see it, manage it, apply good data governance, a good privacy, a good security, and not kill and stifle innovation. So it's a very long-winded answer, but hopefully I covered where you wanted to
No, it's a
go.
cracking answer. It's I never thought of it, especially the last topic. When you look at it from that perspective, it actually, if you're not governing it correctly and you're not training your resources correctly on how to use it and what products to use, yeah, 100%. It's quite funny because you always wonder why a lot of people carry two phones around. Well, there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason. We want to govern what you're doing and what information you're sharing. But yeah, I like the shadow AI side of it. I've not thought of it in that way before. Um, so when you look at right, okay, you work with a business, you've helped them strategize on the best use of how to bring artificial intelligence into their business. Um, how how do you see businesses in the future sort of, I suppose, look at it, continue to augment and automate at the same time? How do you is it actually no change to a business world? It's just making sure that AI is incorporated in it. I suppose what I'm trying to get to is, you've got all of these new automations that are running. You've got all this data coming in, new information, but you want to continue to review how those processes are done. Does any of that process change once you bring in AI, or do you think no, you just continue down that route?
Well, if you go back even 20 years, we've been automating things for a very long time.
Hmm.
The whole digital transformation journey, we automate insurance claims processing, or we automate, whatever it is, appointment making for the healthcare sector. So
Hmm.
automation is going to continue at pace.
Hmm.
It's like when we understand a particular process, a business process, and we have the right inputs and it's predictable, we can automate it.
Hmm.
So now when we add AI, we're taking the human and saying, okay, what is it that the human would do that we've unable up to this point been able to put into code?
Hmm.
And so that's what comes next. So now we're having it do some initial analysis on all of this data that wasn't before possible. And
Hmm.
you give that to the actual person who's the human in the middle making the final decision.
Okay.
So automation has been happening. Automation is going to continue to happen. We're going to automate a different part of the process because we're going to automate some human functionality and then let humans do checking before it actually goes out to the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It must impact how people measure success, though, or do you think not?
No, I don't think that it changes how you measure success.
Cool.
I think ultimately, as a business, you're still looking at the same core drivers.
Mm.
How do I actually increase my revenue? How do I keep my customers happy? How do I, manage retention? It's all of those standard business metrics. And then what are the costs associated with doing those business objectives? So we're still focused on what's the business.
Mhm.
It's just how effective and how efficient are we at being able to do that?
No, that makes sense. Again, it's just making sure that as a business you're really utilizing it in the right vein. You're not focusing too much on artificial intelligence to automate everything. You need to make sure you're bringing it throughout the whole process of your business, but using the right parts of it for the right stage of that business. Um,
Even beyond that, so when I look at complex business questions, like the example I gave, which was the
yep.
IT resource allocation, those are things that today you might actually get somebody, one of the big five consulting firms would come in. They'd say, okay, we're going to build you a data lake. They're going to extract all the data. They're going to do an ETL, extract, transform, and load, and they're going to build all these huge queries, and it's going to take 6 months and 5 million, and actually it takes 2 years, and it takes 20 million. And then by that point in time, the business has changed, and the answers have changed, and the questions have changed,
Yeah.
and that's where I see real AI short-term value
Okay.
that nobody's thinking about. Because right now they're thinking, how do I write one more marketing piece of content? How do I give a better answer for a lower cost at my customer support teams? They're looking at the real low end,
Yep.
the real basics, where the big corporations, the big enterprises are saying, I've got this, terabytes or petabytes of data that have all this insights. What questions should I ask?
Yeah.
And if you give somebody one question and you give them a relatively good answer to the first question, the questions come thick and fast.
Yeah.
Because we always say these questions fell into what I call the too hard bucket.
Hmm.
The CIO gets this question, every quarter. The amount of time and energy it would take to answer that question, I just don't have the time. So it goes into the too hard bucket. But if I give you an AI prompt that can talk to your data across your enterprise, across Salesforce and across SAP and across Oracle Financials and across Jira and across all of your existing product documentation, and you can make a direct query and get an answer back, the too hard bucket gets less full.
Yeah, definitely. Man, it's so interesting. You must really enjoy your job. You come across with a lot of passion about the industry and that you work in.
I
Um,
really, really do. I enjoy solving problems. I enjoy helping people ask the right questions and then knowing what's the technology that's available today to get you moving forward.
yeah. and that's half the battle. When we spoke before, I'm in the pure tech services space. There's 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 an absolute swathe of technologies. A lot of them aren't marketed that well because they don't have the budget to do so, or smaller startups. But you're looking at like 200-300 pieces of technology that follow or manage part of the procuring process. And for a buyer to be able to go in and navigate and understand, well, actually, which piece of tech do I need? It's quite a difficult thing. And actually, do you need that tech, right? So stop looking at the tech. Tell us what your business problems are. So I take it a lot of your role is is around that as well. I'm gauging that, yeah, we can talk about artificial intelligence, but let's deal with that when we really know what the business problem is.
Correct.
Yeah,
Start with the problem and then decide the best way to solve that problem.
yeah. It's a very, very common problem. We all rush sometimes to go panic buy something when maybe we
Oh,
need
and
to.
the appeal of the next bright and shiny thing. The fact that your board of directors keeps saying, "What's our AI strategy?" I'm like, okay, comma.
Yeah, let's just talk about the business problems you've got and whether AI can help you solve those business problems and improve them, and improve how your business is getting success. Look, I've really enjoyed this chat. I know we've pretty much just gone half an hour already, which is amazing. Um, but I'd love to just sort of ask you the final point, which really is, I'm a CIO, I'm a CFO, whatever it would be. I've got a whole range of business problems that I don't seem to be getting the answers to. What's my best approach? And you can say contact Troy if you wish, but what what methodology do you think is the best practice for those people to follow that haven't gone down that path yet with AI?
First, define the right question or questions in really, really good detail so you know what the question is and what is the value of being able to answer that question,
Hmm.
because that will then drive the rest of the process. The second thing is take a survey of the data sets that you have available. So what data do you have in your CRM system? What data do you have in your financial system? What data do you have in your product documentation that might be able to help you answer that question and draw a correlation between those two? Here's all of my data sets that might have information that will help me answer this one particular question. The third thing is decide how you want to apply AI. Most enterprises want to do it within a closed environment because you don't want to have your corporate data being used externally. Even if OpenAI and ChatGPT promise they're not going to train on your data, some people will want to actually have some level of AI infrastructure, some large language model, like the open source one from Lambda from Meta. That would be the best. Llama from Meta. That's the one I was trying to say. That you would deploy locally. And then after that, most importantly, start.
Yeah,
Start small, but start. Because once you start with a small enough question and you get value back and you get an answer, you're going to say, okay, now I see why I'm doing this, and the engine's going to run.
yeah,
But I've been doing enterprise innovation for a very long time, and the answer is always the same. Remember, you're a business leader. Your legal people are going to give you a whole bunch of objections. Your teams are going to give you a whole bunch of objections. The market's going to give you a whole bunch of objections, but they're advisors. You're a decider, and decide to start with AI today.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Troy. I've really enjoyed today's chat. Um, there's a few little nuggets you brought out which I didn't know you were going to, so I've definitely learned a few things myself, which is one reason why I do all of this. And I hope all those that have listened to your knowledge have taken something away from it. So yeah, wonderful having you. Thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
so much for inviting me. I look forward to continuing our dialogue.
Definitely, will do.